park closed. And they don't be.
Thank you all for being here. One piece. Can we start with a roll call, please?
Trustee Rubin?
Yes.
Trustee Hallwax?
Yes.
Trustee Mealopoulos is absent, but we have a quorum.
All right, and with that, anyone would like to make a public comment? Read the spiel. If not, hang around. We're good. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes, or did you have any comments or questions about?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I will second it, and all in favor say aye. Done. Brings us to the monthly financials.
Thank you so much. So tonight I'm going to review our February treasurer's report. Monica will review them through the adjustment program. And then we're going to review and have a discussion about the possible local impact fees. So first, starting off with our general fund, our property taxes are less than prior year by $295,000 and at 16.8% of budget. That is including the January tax disbursement that was for 2025 tax levy 24. Without those, I don't have it on the slide, but that means we're at a deficit of 2.4 million and we're only at 0.8% of our budget for property taxes.
In the first couple of weeks of March, had there been any slugs of cash coming in from the county?
Yes. So getting right to there on my last bullet point, we had you're fine. We had a February disbursement that the county has not updated the portal to define if it's for the 26 year or 25 year. But then in March, we got disbursements that are clear that they say they're for 25, tax levy 24, and prior years. But we don't have the actual documentation from the county website to specify what that is.
Okay.
So we're still kind of waiting for those reports to come in. I talked to our auditors today who said no one else has, seen them either.
Right.
And so we'll be following up with the auditors about what else we can charge back to 25.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Sorry.
You're okay. And just a reminder, so second installment tax receipts, that big portion, that 2.2 million that was in January is accrued back to 25. And then 2026 first installment, that due date was moved to April 1st instead of March 1st. So hopefully we'll start to see some more disbursements around April 1st, but the county probably will lag. We'll probably see them in April. Moving on to state income tax. So one thing to note is that there is a proposed decrease to the local government distributive fund, the LGDF, from 6.47 to 6.28. This is something that's proposed. We did a calculation and we came up that it's maybe around $50,000 worth of an impact to us. And so we'll see how that shakes out from the legislative vote.
We are going to be reaching out to legislators to remind them again of the backwards nature of that proposal in terms of what we've been advocating for and the reasons why the LGDF is important. And so we'll be doing that outreach later this week.
Thank
you.
Our sales tax have been more than prior year. These are November sales that we're seeing, and at 16.2% of budget. February, we should be around 16.7% of budget, so that's on target. And then just to note that our grocery tax, our first receipt should be seen in April. So we'll be reporting on that, not next month, but the following month in May for April. Sales tax, building permits, parking fees, garbage service fees, sewer charges were all higher than prior year in monthly budget, which is good news. Moving on to the general fund expenditures. It's more than prior year, but right on target at 16.8% of budget. Our annual revenue projection, revenue only, general fund is at 2.7 million, but that's with the property tax receipt for 25. So it's really at 548,000 without that receipt. That is primarily made up of sales tax, which has come in a little bit higher than projected, and also building permits. The annual projected fund surplus deficit of expenditure versus revenue is at a deficit of $243,000. We have a planned drawdown of 2.2 million for our capital improvements this year. Without that property tax receipt, we're at 2.4 million, so very close to being on track. Fund reserves at month end are at 11.5 million, which was the same as last month, which is 42%.
So is the, backing up one slide. So if we think we're on 550 up on the revenue side.
Mhm.
And we're looking at a couple $100,000 more drawdown.
Mhm.
So that's 750 of extra disbursements. And if expenditures are about what we think they're going to be, at least so far, is that because of scheduling capital projects
Yes,
the remainder of the year?
yes.
Got it.
There has not been very much capital expenditure in the general fund.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And that is in the last page of the financial report has the update on that.
What I figured. I'm asking that as opposed to, oh, no, there was something else going on. There is.
No, it's related to the capital expenditures. Moving on to the water fund, so volumetric revenue is higher than last year, but only at 10.4% of budget. And just a reminder, so these would be for bills that are 3 months in arrears, so November, December, January. So this is lower than budget currently just because of usage is lower at this time, but it will catch up as we move into the springtime and summertime. Fixed charge revenue is higher than prior year and at 13.5% of budget. And expenditures are higher than prior year, but at 13.5% of budget, so less than that 16.7 that we would probably be at. And then we have our annual revenue projection, revenue only. We're in the positive at $38,000. If you add in expenditures, we are at $2.5 million, and we had a planned drawdown of 1.8. The reason why there's so much money there is because that takes into account the bond issue of 3.4 million that's going to happen later this year. Our fund reserves at month end are 5.5 million and at 92%, which was the same as last year also. Now I'll turn it over to Stella and Monica for a quick update on the belt fund.
Thank you. So Thursday, we will be approving the restaurant interim agreement. Very excited to be moving forward with them. They have now incorporated as a clubhouse group. The name of the restaurant is still being bounced around. We will have something fairly shortly, I think. We're looking for ideas. If anyone has any ideas on what we're going to call the restaurant itself and also the private dining room. But he is excited. So after the meeting, we will be handing over the keys to the restaurant trailer and he can start setting up business. Brings me to my next point of opening day, which has been a moving target. We did think we were going to be open this Friday last week, and then all of this happened. It looks like we're going to get more snow tonight. The grass is not playable. It's very wet. We really need to keep people off because the damage that they do now will last throughout the season. So he is going to be ready for opening day whenever that should be. Typically it's around April 1st. We need the overnight temps a little bit warmer too to help keep the grass playable and healthy. And the construction update, the geothermal field work is scheduled to start next week. All the underground plumbing is complete. The trusses are complete. They did pour the concrete on the north slab. So the area that does not have a basement, they poured all that last week. And the perimeter walls will start going up there as well. And the ice and water shield is completed on the slope roofs prior to all of this cold weather. So everything's moving along there. Thank you.
You want me to give an update now, or do you want me to give an update?
We can do
this
it
year?
real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll lead it in and then Monica will give you the details. I had included last week in the Friday report that we were working on an additional agenda item that was likely to be added to the board's agenda for Thursday night. We did add that earlier this afternoon in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. And that relates to a clubhouse change order with WB Olson. That's now on the board's agenda. I'm going to be sending that out after this meeting, and Monica's just going to walk you through a quick overview of that.
Yeah, so this is our third change order with WB Olson. Last month, we came to you with a change order that was primarily focused around the issued construction drawing changes. Those were scope changes. So from when we went out to bid, through permitting, all the changes that happened through that, as well as some owner initiated changes. So those are like actual physical scope changes. The change order 3 is a bit different. What we're looking at is what the goal of this change order is setting a completion date for the clubhouse. So the way the contract is written right now, it says that the clubhouse completion date will be 330 days after execution of the contract and obtaining our permits, which there was a delay in us obtaining our permits. So at the time that seemed reasonable, the 11 months, but the delay in obtaining permits, nobody wants that completion date to be 11 months from last December. And so we are agreeable with WB Olson on setting a new completion date. But with that, we also want to make sure that there's a guarantee that we hit that completion date. So a couple components to this change order. We want to acknowledge that there's been a schedule delay. And so there is an increase to the overall contingency of $225,000 to help with those schedule impacts overall to the project. But at the same time, we are adding claims, not called liquidated damages, it's called claims, if they don't meet the substantial completion date. So it is set for August 14th. The claims are $1,500 per day for the first 14 calendar days. That moves us into Labor Day. Anything after that will be $4,500 a day. So we really want a firm understanding of when our vendor can move in, when they can start setting up their restaurant equipment, when we can start accepting reservations and having the restaurant open. So we're at a point now where we really need that firm date. We really need to understand and start building out calendar for the year. So I do think that this change order provides that firm and final completion date and resets the understanding of the original contract.
So they need to do things, work longer hours, Saturdays, whatever. That contingency fund is there to take care of it, to allow them to meet that date and take the risk that once they hit that date, they're starting to get less money on this contract.
Correct. Yeah, so it includes all those things. I do want to touch on kind of the overall budget impact because this is our third significant change order with them. So the original contract award with WB Olson for construction management and the overall construction of the clubhouse was at $14.8 million. This change order, this third change order will put us at an overall change order value of, it's actually $733,000 overall. So that first one was the PVC elimination, so changing the material in the building and permitting costs. The second one was the ISC changes. And then this last one, focusing on schedule, those combined with the 733. So with that, we're trying to understand where does this put us overall with budget. We have our original budget numbers. We have our contracted awards amount right now. What we're looking at, the clubhouse construction has always been separate from some owner's items costs that we are have budgeted for and are accounting for since the beginning. Overall project cost is upward of 19 million. It's not that far off from where we started, but it is going to be higher than what we anticipated, right? So I think original budget was just over 19 million. We're seeing that we're going to hit that and potentially exceed that, as there are some further unknowns as we continue with the project. But we are keeping budget in mind. We're trying to keep as close to that original budget as possible, and then taking a closer look at the revenues to be able to meet the cost for the clubhouse project.
I've got to say that I mean, just. Ground up construction, let alone all the problems we've had and all the extra costs that we've incurred because of all the delays and all the redo this permit, redo that. And I think you guys have done an amazing job helping to manage this project through, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, we got a ways to go still.
Yeah.
So continue to stay at the cost as much as we can.
By the way, can we call the restaurant Joe's so we can just.
The foremost.
Broadway song.
Could let me just go back to what Monica was talking about. Obviously, we hate that we have had to spend a dime more than we think we contracted for. But in the real world, that always happens. Gary, this is part of his job, so he knows about this. Anybody who reads the paper knows about this. Let me say, and I've joked about the fact that my general view of contractors comes from Naked Gun. Forget Mike, for a number of years, I was a building contractor. I am satisfied that Phil and Monica and the team, but particularly Monica, working with our lawyers, have been relentless in riding herd on the contractors and representing our interests. And that's the best we can, the lawyers that helped us write this contract, every time the contractor says, I want this, or I want that, or I need this, Monica and our lawyer go back and say, excuse me, this is what the contract says, and this is what we do. So I am satisfied. It would be great if it came in as we hoped it would, but I am absolutely satisfied that the village is well represented by Monica, Phil, and our lawyers in making sure we're getting our money's worth as best we can. So that's all we can ask for. So thank you. Keep it up. And we're going to end up with an excellent product, and we will not have paid more than because of the work you guys are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. So going back to our update on some other funds, so debt service is at 0% of budget, which is expected, and won't make that first interest payment until June. Capital projects were at 16.7% of budget due to making some payments for the golf club renovation. MFT, we are only at 1.8% of budget. That's mostly the bank charges and things like that. That will increase as the weather gets warmer and we're able to buy some of the items that are in the budget and install them. Pension funds are right on target for both police and fire. And then just an update on personnel. So you can see that we're $467,000 higher than the prior year. And looking at these numbers, looking at salaries. So yes, this is due to some cost of living increases. I was looking at this a little closely that we filled some vacant positions and also added some positions. So we now have an IT director instead of an IT manager. We added an additional IT staff member at the end of the year, and we hired the engineering staff. An update on public safety. We currently have 2 vacancies. We did just receive another resignation, so we will have 3 vacancies. But the good news is that the Public Safety Commission made 2 offers last Friday. So yes.
We don't talk about it too
Knock
much.
on wood,
And
move
maybe.
on. Yes. So that's good news though. Moving on to our economic indicators, just a few things that I noted in the treasurer's report. Public safety recruitment has been challenging. Hopefully we're working towards an end with that. Fuel costs are rising overall. I think everybody's seen the news on that. Information and technology division has seen increases in computer hardware and cloud computing costs. So we are seeing an increase there, which we hadn't seen previously. Our commodities are higher than prior year at 21.6% of budget. Contractual services are higher than prior year, but only at 12.2% of budget. And just as this conflict in the Middle East continues, we may see more commodity cost impacts, and we'll keep the committee updated on those that we see. A great update, the audit. We are finishing up the field work this week, and actually the auditors were supposed to be on site all the way till Friday. They completed all their on-site work today, so they are going to just finish up and wrap up their items this week remotely. They'll be sending their draft, they're sending the report to their managers for review next week, and we should expect to see a draft of the audit report in mid-April. We do have to still wait for some outside reports from the actuaries that use some of the data that we gathered for the audit, and then also IMRF has some reports that have to be incorporated into the audit as well. They've had some difficulty with their systems and had some delays, and so hopefully we'll have some of that information in April as well. So we're still gonna have the presentation of the audit set for June because of those items that we don't really have in our control, but from our standpoint, we're doing great, moving forward, everything's going well. Another piece of good news, the Public Safety Department applied for a grant for law enforcement cameras, and they received $194,410.95 grant. This is, yes, awesome. This will be able to cover costs from July 1st of 2025, so last year, all the way to June 30th of 2030. And this includes, they can submit for a reimbursement for in-car video cameras for law enforcement vehicles, officer worn body cams, and then also the data storage that's related to the officers worn cameras.
That's the expensive stuff.
Right.
Yes. And training for the law enforcement officers and the operation of the cameras. So I think in our budget this year, we had like $48,000 for the cameras for our continual replacement cycle. So that's a good chunk of money that will help cover those costs for the future years.
That's great.
Yeah, great news.
Who provides the grant?
It's a state grant. And so this one, Chief, do you know like I brought my paperwork here. They said it's not a federal grant. Pardon me one moment. It's just state of Illinois law enforcement training.
That's right.
That's what it says.
It's the state supported grant through Alexa, so that, as Margaret had highlighted, it allows for actual hardware and training, which would be minimal, but especially data storage, which is the gift that keeps on giving.
So, with that ends my portion of the presentation tonight. Do you have any? Okay, and I'll turn it over to Monica for our community investment program update.
So the items that will be coming to you for board approval this month, the first one is our 2026 water main replacement. This is on Bluff, Milton Grove, and Lincoln. We're looking for approval for a total amount of $1.68 million. This is above the budgeted amount for the CIP item. However, we are going to be pulling some funding. There is some storm sewer work that was a part of the scope. We'll be using some of those funds, and I think that was part of the plan, is to have those funds available to supplement this project. There's some funds remaining over from last year, and we'll be shifting some other water funds, particularly from the water plant site security, which I'll touch on that updated timeline in just a bit. Overall, the budget was originally based on the 30% design for the 1.1 million. As we progressed into final design, some things were added, some things changed. So particularly the storm sewer work, we also increased the amount of pavement restoration that we were looking at overall in the project as we progressed into design. The engineer's estimate was actually at 1.9 million. So for our contract amount to be coming back at 1.6, we do see that is favorable. We were happy with the bid results. I think we had about 5 or 6. And we are awarding the contract to DeMayo Brothers, who we know, and we're very excited to be working with them.
History with.
I should have led with them. So the second one is for the window replacement at the water plant. We'll be awarding that contract, the total budgeted amount of $125,000. It did come in below contract, but we do want to give some buffer to if we do need to adjust like a full window pane replacement versus a full window replacement as we get into the actual construction, allow for that flexibility. But that came in under budget as well. And then also the parking enhancements at West Park. This is a park district, Glencoe Park District led project. They did all the bidding, the design, construction. So they'll be starting construction, I think, in April. They're going to the board as well. We had budgeted $45,000 to split the construction of angled parking spots along Cherry Tree Lane. That actually came in under budget as well, but we're looking for full approval just in case there's any change orders that come through throughout construction that we can accommodate that. But I think the final price was around $37,000 each for us in the park district to split that 50-50. And then obviously the one that we just added, and we talked about the WBO change order as well. Any questions on the contract awards? So changes to the timeline. Water plant site security, that timeline's been shifted a couple months. We're still working through the concept design with our consultant. We don't think we'll be ready to present those design alternatives until about June. What we're looking at is there's some main goals we're trying to hit with that project, and there's some different approaches that we could take. So we're trying to look at those different approaches, whether it's just a minimal light touch approach or something more substantial that would cost significantly more. So trying to explore the grant funding opportunities that may come if we choose a more expensive option and look at those funding overall. So we'll bring more detail back to you, but that timeline has been delayed. And the reality of that timeline then affects our ability to get final plans and get out to construction by the end of the year, which means that we took some of the funding from that project and helped supplement the water main replacement, just because that delayed timeline, we didn't think we were going to expend all of those funds. The next one is the pedestrian crossing improvements. This is the audible pedestrian signals for Harbor and Green Bay Road. That bid opening is this week. So we'll be presenting that to the board next month. The Village Hall South Entry renovations and Fire Bay driveway replacements. We're still working to finalize those plans with the consultants. That has not gone out to bid yet, so that probably won't be ready for board approval until May. So we'll get that out to bid in April and look for board approval in May.
Just a question, the Fire Bay driveway replacement.
Yes.
Talking about actually replacing all that concrete?
Mm-hmm. So
There's two segments of it.
yeah, the third kind of half segment was replaced about 4 years ago, Phil.
Well, I think it's probably about 2 years ago. We replaced a hydrant out there, and when we did that, we tore it all up, so we replaced it. But it's falling. It's falling apart pretty quickly. So the remaining two that are closer to the entrance wall are going to be replaced as a function of also that entrance wall, or the entrance being removed and replaced.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. The bridge maintenance, construction, engineering for Hazel and Lakewood bridges. We're still working on finalizing that scope with our consultant, WJE, the engineering consultant. So that will be ready next month. And then lastly, the schedule shift for servers and other network infrastructure upgrades. We shifted that as well to May, just to allow for some more time for planning and scoping before we bring it to the village board. Any questions on timelines or shifts?
So with that, I'm going to ask Taylor to discuss the review and discussion of possible local impact fees.
Really gonna lead everything. So there's a lengthy memo that Taylor and Margaret put together. And you'll recall that last year, we started having some staff conversations around the subject of impact fees. And now, given our home rule status, what we may have the what alternatives may be available for us to consider. So we didn't get through that full evaluation in the lead up to the current fiscal year's budget. And so there were no recommendations that came forward. But kind of in light of some of the legislative activity that has started to take place down in Springfield as it relates to the BUILD initiative, which is a sweeping set of legislative initiatives that the governor proposed in his budget address back in February that could have the potential, if enacted as they're drafted, to radically change the way residential development takes place throughout the state of Illinois. There were some conversations about whether now would be a good time to initiate further discussion around whether we may try to put a flag in the ground relative to certain fee structures. We have run that by the village attorney, and he gave us a lot of helpful information in terms of our authority, which is pretty wide, but also brought some reality to the fact that if the legislation is enacted, it is likely to be enacted with local preemptions. So if we were to have significant impact fees in place, it's not likely that those would survive if the legislation was enacted. That all being said, there may be some alternatives for us to consider. And so what Taylor and Margaret and I will walk through with you is kind of this concept. There are no specific recommendations in this memo. This is really intended to be an initial dialogue with you all to give us some direction as to some ways we may think about moving forward, either during the course of the fiscal year or in the preparation of the next fiscal year budget. But we wanted to make sure that we got some information into your hands and then had the opportunity to answer questions and get some feedback, and then we can keep working on this. So with that, I'll hand it off to Taylor.
And this is something of a moving target, I think, because of what's going on in Springfield. We don't know how much of that is actually going to make it through, but for the time being, I'll start with what we do now. The village collects impact fees for park district and school board purposes. We don't have any of our own impact fees. Those fees are based on the number of new bedrooms in additional dwelling units. So we don't collect these fees for tear down and rebuilds. We don't collect them for additions. We only collect them if you do a building project that creates a new say that again? A new dwelling unit only. So if you go from one house to two houses, one house to three houses. One for one, we don't collect them. We also don't collect them unless the project goes through a subdivision process, which most of the projects that create new houses will go through a subdivision process. Not all of them. There are some exceptions where you might not need to go through that subdivision process. I'll talk about that in just a minute. So what we don't do now, we don't collect our own impact fees for our own use, for village use, only park and school use. We do not collect them for projects that don't go through a subdivision, and we also don't collect them for projects that don't add to the number of dwelling units. So the one recommendation that I think that I would make coming out of this is kind of the low-hanging fruit, and that's the third one of those, which is the projects that create new dwelling units, but that don't go through a subdivision process, which is fairly rare. But I think that there's potentially going to be more opportunities for that. The one example I can think of is especially in the RC district, residential streets mostly, double lots. If you have a 100-foot wide lot where you have two underlying lots that are both fully conforming to the zoning code. We've talked this here with the village attorney, and you can build two houses there without formally going through a subdivision process. We'd recommend updating our codes so that that second building permit triggers those park and school impact fees as opposed to going through the subdivision process. Because the way the code is set up right now, we can't collect the impact fees for the park and school district if they don't go through that process. which could be problematic. So that is the one recommendation that we make, is exploring that code change. The collection of those fees, I've been here since 2019, and not considering Forest Edge, which is a bit of a special case, we've collected those fees for 2 houses in almost 7 years. The 2-lot subdivision at 538 and 540 Green Bay, we collected impact fees for the second one of those. We have a 3-lot subdivision at 5 Briar at the end of the cul-de-sac there. We've collected impact fees for one of those homes. The second one is in review right now, and we'll collect fees for that. When you're going from 1 home to 2 homes, you only collect fees for the 1 additional home. You don't collect fees for the 2 new homes that are being built, just 1. Similarly, at 5 Briar, we'll collect fees for 2 of those 3 new homes. Forest Edge is a special case. 29 new lots. We'll collect impact fees for 28 of those new lots, because those are the 28 additional lots that are being added. So that's the vast majority of the fees that we've collected, at least since I've been here. It's pretty rare. That being said, I think it's worth considering the Build Act, and that does throw a couple of wrinkles into this, because as currently written, it does open up the possibility of quite a few more subdivisions that could come through. It could increase the pace of subdivisions. So we want to really consider that. The fact that we're not collecting this very often now, that might not be the case in the future. The other part of that is the Build Act is currently written, standardizes impact fees across the state. And part of that is, to get rid of this patchwork of impact fees that different villages have. And so we don't know what parts of this are going to actually make it through into law. As currently written, we might have more subdivisions, but it also might override whatever we do for local impact fees and the state might say, these are your impact fees. You should collect for certain things, for village use, for park and school use, et cetera. And based on the number of units created, here's what you can collect.
In theory, there's one set of impact fees. You cannot have anything outside of this new state mandated impact fees. Here are the fees, here's what you're paying. That's it.
That's right.
You might have had others. They might have been, and those are now gone.
As currently written,
Okay.
that's right. So we don't know if, maybe we'll have the part that would encourage more subdivisions might get through. The part that standardizes impact fees might get through. They might both get through. We're not sure yet. So it is a bit of a moving target at this point.
Could I, let me just throw out something that I worry about, or we will be guessing. The example of this is when Illinois said in 2011 or 12, no new local gun control. But if you already have gun control, then you can legislate within whatever the new limits are. The thing I want us to think about and be smart about is, it would be, if we don't have impact fees that maybe we would like, or fees that maybe we would like, if the legislation is, and the current legislation doesn't do this, but if the legislation were to say, okay, these are the state impact fees, but if you don't have any impact fees, you have none. You can't have any. So that's I don't.
We have to have impact fees before the state comes out with their.
Yes, that's what I'm worried about that, because there is history of that in gun control.
That's a very specific question that we have been talking about with village attorneys, and I brought up with the Northwest Municipal Conference. I think the circumstances and conditions around the assault weapons ban were focused somewhat differently than they are with this legislation. But I see your point, and that's to a large degree been a lot of where we have been trying to understand how we might look at impact fees, or we might look at an alternative to impact fees that would still generate benefit to us if the state were to do something unique like that. Now, the thing I will say is the state didn't say if you don't have it immediately, then you can't have it. What the state said before the assault weapons ban was you have 2 weeks. if you enact something within the next 2 weeks, it will survive. If you don't, you have lost your shot. So they gave a window that would have the opportunity to enact something in advance of the legislation becoming effective. So that could be, that was how that worked back then.
We would,
in
and for
2013.
Glencoe, because we were not home rule, couldn't do it anyway,
Right.
so it passed us by.
I was in Northbrook when that happened, and there was a concerted discussion about whether or not to do so. And we would have sufficient time to work to enact something like that. It would be a special meeting type of a scenario, but we could do something.
So all I'm saying is, we should think about what we might want to do in case we need to do it. Okay, we don't know the extent to which we could be. We've sort of been bushwhacked by the parking thing, no people over parking. So we discover, the entire village is can't require developers to put in parking anymore. So we just need to be ready.
Well, I think what we have here are a series of
Yeah,
alternatives
yeah.
that we might want to think about. So yeah, for sure.
Okay, so then I just want to throw out, that was something, we're not going to go crazy over impact fees. There are requirements for impact fees, but it's not like we're rolling in money. It's not like we don't have a legitimate interest. And so we just want to do our best to protect ourselves as best we can.
So one alternative is to village impact fees. In that creating impact fees that we collect for village uses. And we attached a spreadsheet that we got some information from a lot of our neighbors. And I think that you'll see on there that collecting impact fees for your own use essentially is quite rare. Most of them most of our neighbors, if they're collecting impact fees, are parks, schools, libraries. We do see a few instances of infrastructure or public safety, but it's rare. We talked through this with the village attorney, and in order to successfully justify an impact fee, you have to be able to prove that the new development is, and this is a quote, specifically and uniquely attributable, or the impact is specifically and uniquely attributable to that new development. So there has to be a really clear tie between the additional housing units, the impact on village resources, and the fee that you're applying to help mitigate that impact. Illinois has a very high standard for that. It's new development would be a lower hurdle than some of the other things that we mentioned in the report that we're not recommending, which could be things like trying to apply a village impact fee for tear downs and rebuilds, where it's a 1-for-1 replacement, or additions to existing homes. That would be a very high bar to clear, to be able to say a 1-for-1 replacement of a house is going to meet that standard of us being able to collect an impact fee. So the one that we would say that we should consider, even though again it's rare, would be collecting village specific impact fees for those same projects that we currently collect impact fees for the parks and schools, ones that add dwelling units. Mixed use development and commercial impact fees, we don't currently. Front door doorbell. We don't currently have commercial impact fees. They're not likely to, commercial projects are not likely to have a significant impact on parks and schools. But it could be something, especially as we get into implementing our comprehensive plan, which does call for us to look for ways to allow more housing on the Green Bay Road corridor and in our commercial districts. If we're gonna have the potential for more mixed use or commercial or multifamily housing in those areas, looking at ways to potentially apply impact fees to those. The new state law again might tell us what we have to do. It might say we can't do anything outside of that state law. With that in mind, another path could potentially be to look at our demo permit fees, look at our building permit fees. We talked about our permit fees last year in some detail. We are currently near the highest, but not the highest among our neighboring communities as far as permit fees, especially for new construction. We're not an outlier, but we're near the top. We're unique in that we roll our demo permit fee into our building permit fee. We don't separate it out, which most other communities do. So for example, when you have a tear down and a rebuild, you're paying the same per square foot fee as the people in Forest Edge do right now for a new house without a demo. That's unique. It could be something to look at, looking into reassessing that demo fees, building permit fees. The board have to consider the appetite for moving even higher up on the list of our neighboring communities if we did want to collect some additional fees to offset some of the impact of that new construction without having it be an impact fee, which might be curtailed by state law next year. I think that's it. Phil, am I missing anything at this point?
No, I think that's a good summary. I think the idea here, just to circle back to the building permit fee question, would be also, the opportunity perhaps if we wanted to designate resources, impact fees are generally intended to be designated for a specific purpose. If we wanted to designate resources as a function of the building permit, we could say, X% of the building permit fee is automatically segregated off to the capital projects fund, right? So it's going for a purpose to be reinvested in our various infrastructure needs. Don't have to do that, but that may be a more palatable approach rather than just ratcheting up the building permit fee for the sake of. The other thing that I would point to, Taylor's comment about the demo permit, the demo fee. You're going to hear Thursday night that the Preservation Commission is going to propose a demolition fee, and that the purpose of that fee would be to pay for some of the incentive programs that they are contemplating and they'll be recommending. So that subject matter is out on the table. When we reset our current building permit fee structure, actually that was one of Adam's jobs before he left and came back. We analyzed our neighbors, and one of the things that we always try to remind everyone is when you look at what it costs to acquire a building permit in the village of Winnetka or the village of Glencoe or the village of Northbrook, nobody cuts that apple exactly the same way. So you have to apply it with a project in order to be able to kind of say how much an individual is going to be responsible for. So to Taylor's point, we rolled that demo permit into the current building permit fee structure from a means of simplicity, right? To try to say, we're not going to come back at you with 14 different fees. We're going to say, this is your fee to build a new house. That is not a sacred path forward. We could adjust that, but just as to be mindful, that was one of the components. Aside from the impact fees for schools and parks, which are statutory, we've tried to be as clear as we can with what it's going to cost you to do it. So that's why our fee structure is more simple than many of our neighbors, but we have to do some work in order to showcase how we fall within the hierarchy of cost. So that's just context for you as we think about this. I don't think there's one right, wrong, or intermediate way of looking at these ideas, but I do think there's value in should we enact something, ensuring that there is justification for that, so that when we're talking about it in the community, people understand what it's for.
I was curious, page 63, what was the blue? Why are these highlighted blue?
Those are what we have currently. So those are the school and park district impact fees that are set for us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to basics. Impact fees as such, not demo permit or permit fees or construction fees. Other than the impact, we call it an impact fee. the hurdle is you gotta explain why. And whether you link it or not, but
That's right.
you can
Explain
link,
and
you can link it
explain
to
and
why.
justify.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, what are the explanations we have if we wanted to have an impact fee? You've got new development based on the statute that's coming down the pike or whatever, on Dr. Green Bay Road, it's gonna be X number of units, and what's our
Could be the impact to the roadway system because there's increased traffic. It could be the impact to your storm sanitary or water system because of the impact to additional. I would say the reason those have been, those make sense. They particularly make sense in greenfield development where a lot of that infrastructure already does not exist.
And even where it does exist, isn't it almost like, well, the schools, right? You're gonna have more kids and therefore,
Right.
There'll be more use of school resources. You're going to have more human beings in those dwelling units.
And you may need
And there will be more use of the parks and the
Yeah.
roads and this.
or you may need more of those things to service those people. Right.
And you're not charging, a giant amount of money. It's relatively.
Well, and I think one point to be made though is that they are fees in lieu of, right? So the way they're structured is that in an environment like that, what you really should be providing is land, right? So you're setting aside developable land for the purposes of public need. So schools, because you're building more houses, potentially you may need more schools, and so you may bank land for a future school building or have to build one. The same is true with parks. You have more people, and in order to ensure that there's enough open space, you provide parkland. And if you can't do those things or don't want to do those things, that's where the fees come into play, right? So they are alternatives to the primary. The primary is land.
You're saying if you had a very big development, you'd be banking land, the developer would provide land.
That's kind of part, the idea behind the impact fee is that it's in lieu of what you would otherwise want.
The developer putting in the ground infrastructure at the Hoover Estate and then dedicating it once it's done and inspected over to us, whether it's the street or the pipes or whatever. Yeah, no, I get that.
Yeah, and those are functions of the subdivision agreement, right? So those are negotiated and right.
But I'm getting back to the more technical point. Is it realistic to consider impact fees as one way to go, given the hurdle? It sounds like it might be, and that it wouldn't be, because I don't want to do something and then $12 we spend $20 getting challenged in court, right? That's so if it's difficult to get them, and because nobody else seems to, or very few people seem to be doing it, it's got to be a reason. I just want to be leery of that, especially if there's an alternative way to get to the same place that is easier to enforce, which would then lead us back to perhaps something on the new development permits. And maybe, I don't know if you can have different fees for newly developed land versus undeveloped land, versus already developed land, the same way that, two houses versus one house. I don't know if any of that is permissible. I think it would be something we should consider. I did see on the, Thursday, we are going to be getting that presentation, the committee of the whole, about how we might want to provide some credits for people that are willing to restrict the destruction of their homes for the sake of the community and give them a little incentive, and then charge other people a little bit more to help pay for that. So, I'm not sure where all this falls, but yes.
Question. Could we fold in development fees as part of a development agreement or plan development?
Yeah, I think
Is it-
we
Can we
absolutely
negotiate
can.
those separately? Yeah.
Well, I think with the PUD, I mean, Taylor can speak to where things are
Where we
with
are on that,
PUD.
yeah.
My understanding is that we could. Again,
Okay.
that's the state law and maybe future interpretations of the state law that might come out of the judicial system might change that. But my understanding is that the way that I've read it so far is the state is proposing to standardize impact fees. With a PUD, back and forth deliberation, negotiation, you can even call it with PUD, or the subdivision development agreement fall under that? I don't think it would, as it's currently proposed. Can I guarantee that that's how it would be interpreted years in the future? I could.
But it's a fair point, and I do think that is likely one of the reasons that you don't see a lot of municipal impact fees, is that they're negotiating certain functional components into those subdivision agreements, right? Or into the PUD, using their PUD as kind of the tool to get what it is that they need, right? So if what you're saying is our sewer system doesn't have the capacity for this new development, okay, well then what you're going to do as the builder is to upgrade our sewer system off-site to accommodate what you're building. So it serves perhaps even in a more effective way, the same purpose to get what you're looking for, which is your project is impacting our community's infrastructure. So you're going to have to upgrade it if you want to build this. That's generally what typically has happened, which schools and parks don't generally have the same. They're not at the table.
Right.
So that's where they have kind of this statutory component.
And I do think that a big part of this proposed state law on the impact fee side is the state law is proposed as the intent is to make it easier to build additional housing units, and they don't want municipalities to undermine that by charging huge amounts of impact fees.
For all the ADUs that are going to be going up.
Potentially, if you say you can buy right, build ADUs, but we're gonna, you can put in enormous impact fees.
Got it.
That
Shut it down that way.
right, that's what they're trying to prevent.
Other question, I never heard of the library impact fee. That was a new one to me.
I think there was a couple in there. I don't remember who did it, but there were.
Yeah, I think
Maybe.
some of them were the more, I think the more western suburbs that are again in growth zones.
Establishing a library.
Yeah,
something
or
like that.
establishing additional space or resources, library resources to support it.
Given our community, I don't expect that we would give a lot of money for most of this. Given that we're pretty much built out, but let's see what we can do.
I think the question that becomes somewhat interesting related to how much is, again, if the legislation moves forward and they get rid of zoning restrictions in all residential districts, to Taylor's point, we're probably going to see some subdivisions.
Yeah.
Some. I think that, where those are is probably a question, but we're definitely there's going to be interest. And so the question that we've been grappling with this, and to President Rowan's comment a moment ago, is what can we create to make sure we're getting what we need if that situation presents itself, right? If we have a half-acre lot that currently has a single house on it and now suddenly has 8 units on it, how do we deal with that, right? Because there is an impact. It is certainly to the schools, certainly to the parks, but also to our, you've just got a lot more toilets that flush, a lot more faucets that get turned on, potentially. Okay. Well, this is helpful feedback. We're
When do
going
we
to
expect their final?
Great question.
In the summer.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think they're trying, the legislature's out of session right now. They come back, after today's election day. They'll be back in session in April. My sense of it, based off of what I'm hearing, and I've got a legislative committee meeting with the Northwest Municipal Conference tomorrow. So I'm guessing they're going to give us some updates on timelines, but I would assume they're going to do some work this spring. Whether anything happens in the summer in the lead up to the budget approval, because the state's fiscal year is July 1, or whether this lasts into the fall, really, I think is a function of how much they believe in it. What we're hearing is that downstate doesn't care quite as much. Suburban areas care a great deal. And it's a phenomenon that is starting to kind of cascade across the country. Not necessarily drawn on political lines. State of Indiana, at the beginning of March, passed legislation to accommodate ADUs and certain other duplexes. Am I remembering?
Yeah, I don't remember what the details
That's
were.
that's by right. California has been doing it for a long time. Minnesota has a version of this. The East Coast, Montana has just right. So again, it's crossing kind of the political spectrum, and it's being approached from different vantage points, but it's out there. And the goal, we didn't say this at the beginning, but really the idea behind this is to remove barriers from new construction. That we are in a deficit of new home building, and the perspective is that because of the way things are structured, it slows it all down too much, or kills it altogether, and therefore that's why housing prices are outrageous. And so again, there's a lot of reasons for all of that, but that's some of what we're hearing. It's not really an affordability question. Not in Illinois, at least. That's not what they're selling this as a affordable housing initiative. It's more housing initiative. Right. Okay, well, we'll keep working at this. Come back to you guys next month, probably with some more additional information. If something changes, though, you may hear from us more quickly, and we may want to think about even having something on the April agenda if we find that we need to. But that is something that we'll keep close watch on and keep a pulse going.
With that, is there any other business? Second.